welcome to the Stop Booking Around podcast. I'm John Cronshaw.
And I'm Russell Evans.
Last week we looked at describing your world, descriptions and things like that. Today I just want to have a little bit of a catch up with you about how the writing is going, because I think you might be trying to sneak past me the fact that you haven't been writing. How's it going, Russ? Is it all right?
Yeah, it's slowly but surely. It's the difficult thing about being an adult with another job and small creature to keep alive. But where I can, I've sat down and I've done my best to apply the things we've spoken about. And I know it's only got to be rough. So I'm trying to stick to that too and not to be too precious. But I feel like, especially in my last time I sat down and wrote, I really felt like I'd managed to get over that want to be too descriptive for what is essentially like the bare bones. And I don't know if that was a little bit of ego or a little bit of, because I just enjoy that sort of thing. I think I enjoy being descriptive. I enjoy using words or finding new and interesting ways to describe things. But I know I had to dial it down. So I have.
Well, that's good then. So you messaged me earlier in the week and said that you changed your idea a bit. Is that like you've rewritten your outline, or what have you done?
Well, it's funny because I realised how things have to change. When I came up with the new outline, I changed a specific detail about what happens to Dora. And it's funny how that's sort of made me have to think about how her and Inigo get introduced to each other. So in my very first original idea draft, not even on paper, part of what happened to Dora, how she lost her hand when she got to the underworld, was that she would, appear in the underworld naked, flat grey expanse around her in all directions, which isn't that different. And she would see what looked like a group of people and should approach them. And as she got closer to them, it would turn out that they were zombies. Now, they weren't really zombies. They were another sort of symptom of the underworld. So like the mindless dead, like they lost their mind in the transition, and all they have left is the want to be near part of something. It's like an abstract desire they have. So her reaction to them is just like, oh, no, zombies, because to her, she's seen it all before in her dreams. So she sort of sits down on a rock and starts to think and gets bored, and the zombies wander closer to her, and she sees them more as like an annoyance and so forth. And then one gets too close and she goes to slap it, sort of, just casually, like, get away. And her hand passes through it and comes through the other side without a hand. And at that point, that's when she freaks out, so forth and so on, and ends up meeting Inigo. But because of my outline, rechanging things and adding more events to what happens before she actually gets to the city, and how she lost her hand and making it part of a bigger story, I had to rethink how she meets Inigo. So it's similar, because I still wanted this sense of like panic, her realizing that like things weren't in her control anymore now, that maybe something is different, maybe she isn't dreaming. So she gets into the underworld, and there's like a moment where I describe it like she was like deep underwater, as deep as could be, and then she wasn't. And the pressure, it's like she has to equalize it between herself and the environment. This is basically like the transition, and some people don't make it through it. And it is essentially like your new self, your presence, your mind, and everything having to equalize with, the best term I can come up with is pressure, or like a spiritual pressure of the underworld, where you have to balance your physical form and in a sense become dense, so as to sort of balance and not be crushed by it, or essentially like liquefied by it. None of this is explained. It's all just shown, like what she physically goes through. She manages to sort of do it and stabilize herself, but then her arm starts to turn to like stone. So she manages to solidify herself enough, make herself dense enough, but it goes too far. None of this is explained. She doesn't even know this, but basically what happens is that she starts to harden too much, and the abstract idea of that and how it all works is that so her arm starts to slowly turn to stone and creep up towards her neck, and eventually she will completely turn to stone. So she sort of panics and starts running, and she just runs and runs and runs, and like part of it is that like I note that she doesn't get out of breath. She doesn't feel her heartbeat it feels like she's not exerting anything, and so it doesn't feel like she's getting anywhere. And everything around her is still flat and grey, and it's hard to tell the sky from the land because it's all the same tone. Until she comes upon what she thinks looks like a forest. And as she gets closer, like she's drawn to it, and as she gets closer, the forest is made out of like craggy humanoid figures. This is this thing where she's getting tired and she's starting to feel the pressure, and the stone is sort of building up through her chest and into her neck. And she starts to think like, well, this must be what's happened. Like she starts to accept her situation. She understands that this has happened to other people here. And she thinks like, again, she starts to let go of control and her own fate. And she starts to decide that maybe this wouldn't be so bad to just, let it go here and just be done with it. And then she sort of looks closer at some of the statues, and she sees they've still got eyes. They've still got human eyes that are moving and looking at her, and they're sort of seeping like a grey milk. Obviously she flinches and she realizes whatever these things are, they're not actually dead. They're still conscious. And she sort of looks at her arm and tries to move her fingers, and as she moves her fingers, like this grey like milk cracks out from between the cracks, and she starts to panic and flail, and she starts knocking these things over, and as they split open, this milk comes out from inside, but then freezes with like upon instant contact with the air. And she starts to hear an accordion, and all of the statues like turn their heads, even if some of them fall off to the direction of it, because she can't pick up where it's coming from. But because they all turn their heads, she like runs towards it, and as she runs towards it, it seems like the statues are trying to move to stop her going, and she starts breaking off arms, and her arm starts getting smashed, and it starts seeping, and so forth and so on, until she finally gets to like, it's like a gypsy caravan, and there's a figure on top of it sitting down playing the accordion and singing in Spanish. Like all the statues stop sort of moving, and she gets there, and like the figure, and she collapses in front of it, and the figure jumps down, and it's Inigo. He doesn't introduce himself, but I can't remember the line, but he basically says it really bluntly. It's like, don't worry, you're dead now, to just sort of really hammer home what's happening. But she will wake up and her arm will be fine and everything will be okay. And I kind of liked that I'm going to foreshadow her actually losing her arm properly. And it's funny how that all sort of came about because of just changing one detail, which is just moving the point at which and how she loses her hand.
This will happen, and go with it. Unless it makes something worse than your outline, then just go with it, because this is the thing that I've got you to outline. I want you to outline. I want you to try and stick to it. But you've got to go with your imagination as well. And you're in a process now where you're thinking in probably a very different way to how you've thought about your story before. So instead of thinking about it in terms of this would be cool if this would happen, now you're thinking about how would this fit within the story. And you mentioned foreshadowing. You kind of thought symbolically. There's different ways you're thinking about things now because you've got that outline, and that's really good. So, yeah, good.
It is. It's fun. It's now that I'm starting to be able to use like the tools that you've been sort of helping to provide and so forth. I can actually sort of see the examples of me using them, and it gives you confidence. I'm not saying that what I'm writing is amazing, but I know that it is actually following certain techniques, and because of that, I feel like I'm more able to objectively judge its worth and maybe its need within the story. And it's nice to feel like if I need to, I can just cut something off if it's vestigial. And you never know, keep your ideas. Maybe I can use them later in the story or in a different story elsewhere. Don't throw it away completely.
Yeah, exactly. And I will just say, not wanting you to even think you're going to produce anything that's good. Remember, you are writing a shitty first draft, so please keep that in mind at all times. For next week's homework, then, just keep on doing what you're doing. Keep writing your book. Is there anything that you think that you're struggling with, or you want to ask me about, or that you think we should open a can of worms on and delve more into in another episode?
Well, yeah. It's lore, Lore, aka world building, and like the temptations therein. I think that it's something that is important as a writer, but I think it's also quite relevant right now in media other than writing, and it would be interesting to talk about it. So I think that's something we can dig into.
Oh, well, let's do that then. Next week, then we'll have a think about world building and delve into that kind of worm. So that'll be fun and exciting, I think. Remember, if you're enjoying the show, please do leave us a review. That would be awesome. You can also help support the show financially by checking out the Stop Booking Around book. It's by J.L. Cronshaw. It's called Stop Booking Around: How to Overcome Author Procrastination. We've got a Facebook group. Search for Stop Booking Around. You can follow me on Twitter at JL Cronshaw. You should also check out my other podcast, which is called Otaku on Writing, which is OTAKU on Writing, which is basically where me and a couple of author friends deconstruct classic anime and try and use it to write some stories. So until next time, cheerio.
Bye.